A topic that I would like to use for an American History course 222 would be the civil rights of the 1950s, 60s. I would focus on the 1950s, and I would bring in five newspaper articles, have students summarize them, and share their thoughts as well as watch a couple videos and give reviews on that. To start, we'll begin just to put in context. The Supreme Court in 1954 for Brown versus Board of Education ruled they put a ban on segregation in schools, but it would be a while before we would see a lot of action from that. But what's interesting is that there is an incident or an event that occurred in 1955, and that's the first article that I would look at, and that was the murder of Emmett Till. He was a 14-year-old boy from Chicago who went down to Mississippi to visit some family, and he was murdered by two white men. At the trial, they were acquitted. Of course, later on, we'd see they would come out and admit to killing them. But there's the article here is by John Popman from the New York Times. There's an awesome PBS documentary about this case and this event, and that's one of the videos I would have students review. The next newspaper article would be the December 1955 Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her seat. Now, what's really interesting is that Rosa Parks was actually at a rally or a protest for Emmett Till that Martin Luther King put on. So she's very much aware of what happened in August of the same year. So in December of 1955, she is arrested for not giving up her seat. She is fined, and she appeals it, and so on. And this sparks the next newspaper article I have, and that was the bus boycott. The New York Times also did an article on this. The bus boycott runs from December of 1955 all the way to December of 1956. So this is a long boycott. And one of the videos I would have students review on this one would be the 2014 film Selma, which is, again, a great film. And then the fourth article would take us to 1958, and this is Arthur Lewis's article discussing the school segregation. So two states, Virginia and Arkansas, were still being very combative and not wanting to stop segregation. Matter of fact, if you read in the article, they're talking about what ways can we get around this. If we start a private school, if we label all our schools private, can we keep them segregated? So it's really interesting the lengths that the governor of Arkansas and Virginia were going about trying to keep segregation. And then my fifth article, it is 1965, and it's titled 9 Years After the Boycott. And so the writer Paul Good looks at, hey, so what's happened since then? And it's just sad because it shows a lot of things. There's still struggles. A lot of African Americans were still struggling with jobs and housing. So the schools, in the article, it mentions that of the, as far as segregation, only about 1,100 African Americans were desegregated or integrated, that is, into a school system of 120,000 students. So it just shows that it was still an issue 9 years later. And like I said, I have those films, the PBS documentary on Emmett Till, the film on Selma, and then lastly, I would also use the film Mississippi Burning, 1988, which is in Hackman. And like I said, I'd like to use films to let students review those and give their thoughts. And what we would also do is, at the end of this lesson, is perhaps use some current events and tie these together and show how this is still an issue and still a lot of work needs to be done according to civil rights. Have a great day.